First of all, let's be honest here. I am a normal human being. I have dealt with imposter syndrome. I have had historically a set of limiting beliefs. Like, listen, I think it's important for the listeners to understand. When I was 3 years old, I lived in a one-room log cabin in Lincoln, Montana, with no running water, and we would bathe in the stream. At like 10 years old, I was riding a pony to a one-room schoolhouse. There was no internet. There was no
Mm.
mobile devices. There wasn't the world that we live in now. By the age of 17, I was a high school dropout because I had a math teacher who told me I would never amount to anything. So it's not surprising that I got to the point in my life where I was feeling like I was always going to be a great number two to a great number one, because I had just these limiting beliefs.
This is Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, your go-to guide to solving your biggest marketing agency challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Galton, and each episode is an honest and frank look at what agencies go through, from turning clients to tackling tech and ideas that you can apply to your own business. And now, the rest of today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing agencies like you, going through many of the same struggles you're going through and share their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode inspiration, motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling agencies like yours. It's not uncommon for business owners to routinely have to grapple with their demons, challenges like imposter syndrome, which sit between us and our better angels. That's never more true than with people like influencers and marketing agency owners who live and work in circles where their colleagues and counterparts are highly visible. How do we know our own worth, both as a person, as in an agency? How do we deal with imposter syndrome in an industry filled with larger-than-life personalities to compete with? That's what George B. Thomas is here to help us with. George helps companies streamline and grow by using the right HubSpot CRM, marketing, sales, service operations, and CMS tools. He's a vault of valuable information, tactics, and strategies with a record-breaking 35-plus HubSpot Academy certifications. George's true passion is being a catalyst for growth and helping others be inspired, educated, and willing to work hard to achieve unlimited success. Hey, George, welcome to the show.
Oh, Mike, I am so happy to be here. And there was so much in that little ditty that you just did. The idea of perspiration, the idea of being a vault or being able to create a vault, this idea of just education and helping humans be better. There was just a mad value just in the intro that you gave, and then the little thing about me there. So this is going to be a great episode, my friend.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anyone better to have on the show for this kind of a topic. And I know you've previously worked with talking about larger than life personalities, people like Marcus Sheridan, and you have been a longtime HubSpot expert and advocate. What made you want to start Sidekick Strategies, and what specific services are you currently offering?
Yeah. So, first of all, the idea of starting Sidekick Strategies has been something that I didn't think that I would ever do, by the way, because going from working with Marcus Sheridan, obviously number one energy, me feeling like I was number two energy, then working for Remington Begg at Impulse Creative, again, one of the most technical shops, and people just knew that he was like the number one tech HubSpot guy. And there again, feeling like I had second player energy, a good Robin to a Batman, if you will. When I did leave agency life, I was just going to go out and be a solopreneur and do a little bit of HubSpot coaching, do a little bit of HubSpot implementation, maybe get a couple clients. But the brand that I had built inside of these agencies, I don't think I fully understood the power of it. So for about the first year and a half, I tried to be a solopreneur, and the universe just kept smacking me in my face. And I realized when you have a team of 10, you're no longer a solopreneur. So we should probably show up as
Math.
who we are. And so that's when we decided, hey, let's go ahead and get a DBA. Let's go ahead and create Sidekick Strategies. Let's build the website. Let's actually show people now what we are doing or what we have been doing. Because, by the way, if you went to the georgebthomas.com LLC, website, you'd literally see that it was about HubSpot training, HubSpot implementation, HubSpot onboarding. but we were doing so many other things like video editing, podcast editing, content creation, social media posting for those clients that originally signed on with monthly retainers dealing with HubSpot and HubSpot CMS or CRM implementation items or training that were like, the world doesn't even know all the things that we're doing. And so, again, if we just, I'm not going to list them all, by the way, Mike, because there's probably on our services page, if you go to sidekickstrategies.com/services, there's about 30 services now that you can scroll down through. Some of them are things like super admin training for like HubSpot super admins. Some of them are, the old style HubSpot onboarding and training, but we really get into things like graphic design, video editing, podcast editing, content optimization, by the way. And I'm not talking about like your granddaddy's SEO stuff. I'm talking about like, hey, you've been creating content, but it's just not getting you the lift that you thought it would. A set of eyes, a set of strategies, and the understanding of what to do with what you got to make it really be impactful from a kind of views, more importantly, conversation starting, like conversion optimization, things like that. So again, you can go check out the plethora of services, but we are showing up as an agency. I now wake up and go, oh, I'm an agency owner. And so I'm ready to live in that world, ready to kind of try to build it in a way that is the most human and helpful and happy agency possible on the planet.
Love it. And you're right. And I've known you for years. I've known you from since when you worked for Marcus and then
Yeah.
Remington. So when I looked at your services page, because I did, I was expecting to see the normal things that I associate with you, HubSpot related services. And I was tickled to see things like podcast editing and so on. Because obviously you've been doing podcasts as an example for many, many years. So it made perfect sense that it was there. And yet it was a little bit surprising. So I'm glad you brought that up. But one of the other things I noticed was that you've got these amazing visual themes. I think you adopted maybe first with the Hub Heroes podcast. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but now your new website, they're just full of heroes. And subtly, they're these, normal Clark Kent looking people who are just like, they're poised to become heroes. What inspired that?
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a journey, but you're right, Mike. And actually, it's very humbling the fact that you paid attention to the Hub Heroes podcast and that we had these superheroes created for the hosts, as well as any guest that we would have on the show. I would ask them, what's your favorite superhero? And then we would get them cartooned and we would send it over to them as a gift for being a guest on the podcast. And so there was always kind of this superhero theme. And to be honest with you, part of it was because I'm just a Marvel and DC nerd, meaning I love comics, right? And I love the movies, and that's just part of fundamentally who I am. It's a lot of the tribe or community has surrounded, they're nerds like me. They like comics like me. And it's different too, but it's different in a way that it's not over the top. Like that's the one thing is I wanted it to be professionally fun, but not like childish. And so
Mm.
we started creating these characters. And that was, again, we were doing Hub Heroes podcast back when it was just georgebthomas.com and creating value for the HubSpot community. And when we went in to start to build Sidekick strategies, one of the things that kept ringing in my brain was I want there to be this comic book feel. I want there to be this superhero, potential hero, the hero of your organization. And so, one of the things that we say quite a bit is we help people become the hub heroes their organization needs to streamline processes and drive revenue. And so that's fundamentally part that we've kind of bolted on to the historical happy, helpful, humble human is this fact that now we're creating heroes in the business landscape with what we do and what we teach. And so, again, wanted it to be professional, wanted it to have this comic book hero vibe, wanted everybody to realize that they probably don't understand who they actually can be or who they're on a journey to become. But they could be the Clark Kent, right? They could be the Bruce Wayne. They could be this kind of incognito hero, whether it's marketing, sales, service, rev ops in their organization. And we're there to be the catalyst to help unlock those superpowers for them.
Love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's a lot of takeaways that those of you listening can have from that. Not the least of which is just having the wherewithal to think of a creative way to approach how we're branding our business and our services in a way that is both interesting to ourselves, because that's important, but it's also potentially interesting and empowering to a target audience. I love that. And it's a great segue because you talked about making them the heroes of their business, kind of like that hero's journey. Most of our agency audience share that their number one challenge is growing and scaling their agency. And while there are a lot of external factors that impact that, I think one of the key internal factors is being able to visualize ourselves as a hero, as a success in that role. And the many ways we hold ourselves back from that. And the first is imposter syndrome. I can't possibly be a Clark Kent, or a Bruce Wayne. And we're doubting that we're smart enough or creative enough to offer clients the kind of agency services that deserve and would want to pay top dollar for. And while I'm sure you've probably never ever struggled with this, if you had, how would you have worked to overcome it?
Yeah, so first of all, let's be honest here. I am a normal human being. I have dealt with imposter syndrome. I have had historically a set of limiting beliefs. Like, listen, I think it's important for the listeners to understand. When I was 3 years old, I lived in a one-room log cabin in Lincoln, Montana, with no running water, and we would bathe in the stream. At like 10 years old, I was riding a pony to a one-room schoolhouse. There was no internet. There was no mobile devices. There wasn't the world that we live in now. By the age of 17, I was a high school dropout because I had a math teacher who told me I would never amount to anything. So it's not surprising that I got to the point in my life where I was feeling like I was always going to be a great number two to a great number one, because I had just these limiting beliefs. I read the book by Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap, and it was probably the jumping off point or the catalyst point for me where I was like, oh, I got to get past this. Like, actually, I have transformed myself into something that I didn't even pay attention how far I had gone. And literally on my whiteboard, and this is for the listeners, you need to document your journey. But on my whiteboard, I have right behind me, it literally says, "You've come a long way since 2013." Because I started paying attention to and documenting who I've actually become versus who I was, and what I'm adding to the world versus what I was always taking from the world. And so I just want people to kind of realize that you have this power inside of you, and you can unlock the abilities that you thought you would never have. And it all has to do with actually training your own brain, creating your own belief structures, making sure you have your own core values. And what's funny is when you believe in yourself, when you have these core values, when you train your brain, especially as an agency owner, now you're able to know truly who you are and how you want to show up and how you expect those that you bring on board to also show up. It's funny that you started this question, Mike, with many agencies, owners, and agencies find it hard to scale. I humbly would say I have the opposite problem. It has been hard not to scale, meaning there has been so many humans who have wanted to come and work with us and get us to help them and be in our circle of influence, and not based off of because we're the best, not based off of because we're the biggest, but based off of that we start with the human first, and it's all about the relationship, and it's about actually caring about their success more than our success. And there's some real hard things that you have to decide in your belief structure and in your core values of like, we're always going to do this, we're never going to do that, and this is how we're going to always show up for the client. This is how far we're willing to go. And so for us, what's funny is while there's a pretty decent profit margin, and while we've probably been bringing in more revenue than we ever expected, it's never been about having a profit margin and bringing in revenue. It's just about how can we help the humans? How can we help the humans be the best that they can be? How can we turn these humans into the hub heroes of the organization? How can we add value to humans that might not even be able to pay us right now, but in the future, will they be able to? Maybe, who knows? But going on basic principles again of you reap what you sow, and knowing that every day we're going to sow a little value into the world. That's how you get into kind of this weird magical place where you're like, I can't not say that we're an agency because the universe has made us be an agency.
Absolutely. And I loved your answer, and I appreciate that. I've been blessed to have you on one of my previous shows where we talked at length about relationships. And I see that in you, how important it is to you, how genuine and authentic it is. So I really appreciate that you're able to give me that kind of an answer, that kind of a question. Because honestly, not everyone will be able to answer it the way that you just did, with that self-awareness and having done the work that I know you have done to establish those values and build them in, not just personally, but then professionally. But I think another key way that we hold ourselves back is simply not knowing or recognizing what we're capable of, right? Something I think you touch on a lot in your Beyond the Default podcast. What advice do you have for agency owners along these lines?
Yeah. So it's actually not my advice, but and here's the thing too. I want everybody to realize I can come on this podcast. I can give you tidbits of information that I've been able to learn or, grab from other places and input into my life. And like I literally mentioned the Big Leap as far as a book, things that I learned from Marcus and Remington along the way. I would definitely add those in. But to answer your question, I was watching a YouTube video, and it's a guy named Chris Doe, and he's pretty big on YouTube and has an agency. And he said these words. By the way, it was like a 45-minute YouTube video. I honestly couldn't tell you what the entire video was about, but he said these words, and for some reason, it was like somebody just punched me in my forehead and dropped these words in my brain, and I couldn't let go of them. And he said this, he said, don't sell what you can do, sell what the world can do. And I was like, oh my gosh, like uh, I'm all about relationships. I've actually, over the last 12 years, built this incredible network that is like humbling and yet powerful. And so if I do start this agency, guess what we did? But if I do start this agency and we provide a service that somebody wants to get, and we start to do that service, I could actually always tag somebody in to come along for the ride. And then that's when this kind of epiphany happened of like, oh my gosh, as sidekick strategies, we can collect our league, right? Our Justice League, our
Mm,
Avengers. We can have people who are either part of the organization or contractors of the organization that are our, paid advertising expert, our graphic design expert. But again, it only works if you have the right people in the right seats, either on your bus or in places that you can pull your bus into. And if it's based on this thing of, hey, I'm actually going to sell what the world can do and not necessarily what I can do, because so many of us limit ourselves, limit our growth, limit our future based on what we believe is possible through us. And if you just flip that switch and go, well, I'm smart enough to at least run the trains and get them where they need to go. But all of these other people can be the mechanics of the trains and the driver of the trains and like the announcers of the trains. That was eye opening to me, is this just idea of it doesn't just have to be me. It can be a group of people that are bringing this to fruition. And so that's my advice, is like, if you're sitting here wondering, why can't I scale or how could I scale? And you've been hitting a roadblock, it's, remember, you don't necessarily have to sell what you can do, but you can sell what the world can do.
terrific advice. And I love that you worked in more Marvel and DC references. That's fantastic. We're talking, folks, with George Thomas about how to know your own value and the stories we sometimes tell ourselves. And here to tell their stories, our friends at Stony Creek Social Media Agency.
One, I love social media. I love what we do. I love, one of my sayings is that I feel like we're changing the world one post at a time. And the positivity, it's just, who I am. Currently, we are growing leaps and bounds. We just in the last couple of years have expanded our office. We're getting ready to expand again. We manage over 150 accounts just on Agora Pulse. So it has to be user-friendly for me and everyone that works with it, and it has to be something that I know that I can rely on, that I can trust. Like I said, and the biggest feature that we have is just the dashboard, that it is so easy to use and that anybody can use it. And actually, one of the reasons why I switched from the company that I had used before was that the lack thereof of customer service. It's definitely been, if not the best, one of the best companies to deal with as far as customer service.
I saw you nodding your head as Dawn was talking about their approach to social media. It's so in line with what we were just talking about, right? It's perfect, perfect.
I
So,
mean, Mike, changing the world one post at a time. Like when you have that type of micro thought of like every small action we do is because we want to impact the world, like that's exactly what we're talking about.
100%. Those are exactly the kinds of folks that we like to work with, that we like to have these kinds of conversations, build relationships with. So, for the challenges that we've talked about and many others, you've mentioned a couple books and YouTube channels, which are fantastic because that's a great lead into what I'm going to ask is what are the kinds of resources and channels that you're turning to for help and support and information today?
Yeah. So first of all, the podcast app of choice for me is Pocket Cast, and I have probably 20 plus podcasts that I tune into. And the funny thing is, I've noticed that they change kind of based on the direction that I'm going in. Right, like right now,
Mm.
I have more how to build an agency, how to streamline an agency, how to optimize processes podcasts than I've probably ever had in my podcast app in my life. But that's because that's where my brain is going. Same thing with YouTube, right? Like I've watched more ClickUp tutorials and business processes videos than I ever have in my life over the last kind of 6 to 8 months as we were building out Sidekick strategies and getting ready to launch it to the world. But also there's just these little veins of information. Obviously, HubSpot podcast, obviously AI podcast, because I'm super nerding out on AI and what you can do with it. By the way, all the Clark Kent comic style graphics, AI generated graphics, because we
Oh,
can
brilliant.
literally teach it what we want it to look like, be like, feel like. And so that's how we're creating all of the graphics for the Sidekick Strategy website. So like just all these kind of like nerd segments that allow me to get 1% better each and every day on the layer of things that I want to get better at. And one thing, if people haven't heard of what is the T-shaped marketer or T-shaped whatever you are out there, understanding that there's a line of things that you might want to be good at, but then there's something that you need to be great at. And so for me, there's this line of like content creation, AI, podcasting, editing, but then there's this deep vein in HubSpot, CRM, CMS, business implementation inside of those. And so I'm always paying attention to that with podcasts, definitely YouTube channels, but then also a big one that some people struggle with, but I just want to say it's really, really important is investing in yourself. And I'll say two ways actually. Investing in yourself in understanding your Audible library could actually compete against your Netflix watch list. And what I mean by that is there's a mindset that we can go after that is, hey, it's going to be education over entertainment, and we're going to actually spend time listening to audiobooks or actually reading books if you like to read. Me personally, it's I like to listen to audiobooks. I like to be jotting notes down as I'm listening. Sometimes I like to even be like walking or on a plane or a train or going somewhere, and I can kind of listen and always feeding my brain this information. But then the second piece that I'm going to say is getting a group of people who are like-minded, who are heading in similar directions, and making sure that there is a time that you're hanging out. So for me, one of the smartest things that I did when I left agency life is I started being part of what at that point was the Evolve Men's Group. Now it's the Evolve Leaders or Leadership Group. and we meet every Tuesday. And it's people who are trying to live in the world where maybe the oxygen is a little bit higher. Maybe we're at higher elevations. Maybe we're on a journey that is less traveled. And to be able to have those humans to bounce ideas off of, to have those humans where they can feed into you and you can feed into them, it really does come back to being a designer around the circle that you have around you as far as the humans in the room, because there are so many lessons that I learned from them that are just like in the moment things they'll say that might not have actually been heard or been able to be a piece that we could pay attention to if I wasn't in that space at that time. So again, get your set of podcasts, get your set of YouTube channels, get your Audible account up and beefy where it needs to be, and then make sure you have the right humans in the room so that you can bounce these ideas off of and feed into each other.
That's such powerful advice. And for all of you listening, I'll drop a link in the show notes to a whole workshop that I do about building your own mastermind group, a true mastermind where it's not you're paying to learn from somebody else. I don't call those masterminds, but we're just like you were talking about, George. You're in a group with other peers and colleagues who are in different areas, different businesses, perhaps, but you're all on that same journey in one respect or another, and you can help each other and feed off each other. And being able to step into a group like that and help others is probably one of the most powerful things you'll do. It's not about what you can get from them; it's about how you're going to help them, and you'll grow so much more as an individual. And I loved your point about paying attention to what we're consuming. I saw a recent Instagram post where they were talking about active consumption versus passive consumption, right? And when we just turn on Netflix, we're just consuming whatever it is we're fed. But if we can, not all the time, because we still like our Marvel movies, but some of the time, replace that with a deliberate audible book or a podcast or something along those lines. That's fantastic. I did want to ask you a quick follow-up. Who are some of those specific agency resources and the podcasters you're following these days? Because it's been a little while since I looked at who's still got an active agency podcast, and I'd love to share with the listeners who you're paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll cheat, right? I'll
Oh
pull up
yeah,
my
that's not
app
cheating. Look it up.
and and so a couple of them. Agency Journey is one of the podcasts that I pay attention to. Agency Unfiltered, although there's a bunch of great historical episodes on that, but the person who was running it did just leave the organization that they worked at. So I don't know what's going to happen with that one. Definitely things like Modern Marketing Engine. Can't go without saying social media marketing. Michael Stelzner, I mean, he's the boss. Marketing Made Simple is another good one. As far duct tape marketing, that's another good one. Then there's the Evolve Leadership podcast. Okay, that's probably enough as far as that goes. But then when it comes to YouTube channels, there's oh gosh, I'm forgetting her name, but there's a great ClickUp channel. And again, that's all about like business processes and ClickUps and things like that that I pay a lot of attention to. Nick Nimmin, I'm always paying attention to him because like, listen, we're rooted in like doing video and YouTube stuff for us and for our clients. Pat Flynn, because he talks about some podcasting stuff here and there, and even like where you can align podcasting and some AI tools. And like, again, the pond is so big. And here would be my advice, because sure, I can give you these, like, here's where I go, here's my watering hole, but the advice I would give everybody on this is you've got to take a minute, sit at probably a base of a tree with a notepad, and think about what are you good at that you want to become great at, and what is it that you're weak at that you might want to get stronger. And so then what I do is I figure out kind of like we'll just say a 60-40 or a 70-30%. I'm going to spend 30% of my time becoming great at the thing that I'm always good at, and maybe 70% of my time plugging in the pieces that would make me better in where my weak spots were. Because believe it or not, at one point in time, I didn't even know how to start a podcast. At one point in time, I didn't know how to edit video, right? At one point in time, I didn't even know how to design or develop a website. But it was always this like aggressive quest on learning the thing that I could plug in next to create what might be the masterpiece that you can turn yourself into over time. And that's the other thing is be patient with yourself, be kind with yourself, understand that this is a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you are going to mess up. right? But just know that when I think about messing up, to me, it's not that like I failed. Oh, it's, oh, well, I learned how not to do that again. So next time we'll do it better. And so, yeah, that's my answer on that one, Mike. I know it was a little bit pointed and a little bit esoterical, but like I want everybody to realize that, because sometimes I feel like people listen to podcasts like this and they're like, and now let me go rinse and repeat that exact thing.
Hmm.
It's not probably going to get you the exact same success. What I want you to do is listen to what's being said in between the points, and then how you can kind of use that as the Play-Doh to customize your own path and experience moving forward.
100% true. And I like that you pointed out that we need to think about what we're great at, what we're not so great at, where we need to improve, because not every podcast is going to be for everybody. I mean, I could give you 20 different agency podcasts. They're not all going to be touching on the same topics, talking to the same kinds of agencies. They might not be a good fit for you. So listen to a bunch of them and see which ones are really resonating with you. We just had Brooke Sellis on the show in the previous episode. She's got a fantastic new agency podcast specifically for Stelzner's Social Media Examiner. That might be a great one for you, or not. Who knows? Maybe this one will be for you. I don't know. We'll see. But I know that as a HubSpot agency, the majority of your time is likely spent on systems and optimization training. But I know you also get into some of that marketing automation, reporting, inbound, and more. How do you currently measure the business impact of social media for your clients?
Oh, I love that. It's funny because I don't necessarily think that I think about social media like most other people think about social media. Meaning, most, and I might be able to say this around a lot of the efforts that we put forth, to be honest with you, because so many people are hyper focused on optimizing every percentage rate out of everything they do for every minute of the day. And when I look at social media, there's a couple things that I'm trying to do there. Actually, I'm going to tell you a couple things, and I'm going to tell you a hidden secret, by the way,
Mhm.
about my social media feeds. So, one, I'm always trying to add value. So, how do you measure that? Because that was kind of the original, question. How is it providing ROI? One, I look at the amount of conversations that it strikes up, maybe not even on the social media channels. Like, does somebody look at one of my posts and then I get an email and we're having a conversation? Do all of a sudden they hit me up in one of the Slack channels that I'm in, or one of the Slack community channels that I'm in, and all of a sudden we're having a conversation? Did they leave a comment on the post? How many likes did it get? Why did it get that many likes? Like, what did I do? What did I say? Like, always kind of listening or paying attention to why the things are happening on social, versus a lot of organizations will just, hey, it's, Manic Monday post and Teach 'em Tuesday posts, and it's a Winning Wednesday post. And no matter what, there might not have been no dang wins on Wednesday, but it's a Winning Wednesday post. Like, it's too structured, too scheduled, versus like a lot of what we do is in the moment and just having conversations. But there is a base layer of, well, we know we put out Hub Heroes on Tuesday, so we're going to share that. We know we're going to put out Beyond Your Default on Wednesday, so we're going to share that. And we know we're going to do a major article probably on Friday, so we'll share that. So there is a little bit of structure and scheduling in there, but there's more of a be free with it and be human with it. And so I kind of gave you some very high level metrics, but the other thing that we're paying attention to, because we are using HubSpot, is we have where we can see where the traffic comes from for our websites. And a little secret that I've shared with several people behind the scenes is that for the first 7 to 8 months, the most trafficked part of our site, or what was sending our site traffic, was social media. It, because we didn't have any SEO, right? And we had some referrals, but it wasn't even close. So social media, from a how many people are getting the site and how many people are converting, was the ultimate winner. And still to this day, by the way, it's a neck and neck race between the SEO stuff we've created and the social media presence and community that we have. So I'm actively looking at the numbers. Shoot, I was on a call with a client today And we literally pulled into their dashboard a traffic analytics table that had organic, referral, social, paid, all of those, and literally lined out like, here's the views you're getting, here's the conversions you're getting, here's the customers that have generated from it. And I'm going to tell you right now, when you can see that 360 of, I got, 1,000 people from social media this month, and 50 of them turned into conversations, AKA they're in my database, and five of them turned into customers, and they actually purchased these deals, which are worth, we'll just pretend and say 2,500 or 5 grand a month for the next 6 to 12 months. Now, all of a sudden, you've got an end number, and the humans that you can attach it to, and you can directly tie it back to social media. So did I get real nerdy on analytics and tracking and 360 reporting? Yes. But did I tell the story of that's not really what I care about most at the beginning, because I want people to be more human and more helpful and more flexible and not feel like they're showing up on social media and got to be some certain way? Yeah, I did that on purpose too, Mike.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's why it always kind of irks me when someone says, "Oh, I've got a strategy for social media," and it starts off with how many times per week they're posting. I'm like,
Yeah.
brother, man, that is
Yeah.
not a
That is not
strategy.
a strategy.
No.
That's a schedule, by the way. That's not a
Yeah.
strategy.
Right. And I thank you for sharing that detail about going into the weeds, because that is what we need to be able to do as agency owners on behalf of our clients or social media managers. If we're working in this space, we do at the end of the day need to be able to demonstrate that impact that we're having on the business, because it's there and it's real and it's tangible. Just got to know how to
Yeah.
do it. But George,
Yeah.
this has been absolutely amazing. I love having you as a guest. You always bring so much value to the table. For those who want to learn more about you, about the services you provide, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can go to LinkedIn if that's your jam, and I'm just George B. Thomas on LinkedIn. If it's more of like you just want to see what we might be able to help with, or you have just general questions, you can head over to sidekickstrategies.com, or you can email me, George at sidekickstrategies.com as well. If it's more of like, hey, I have limiting beliefs and I'm not sure how to get over it. And like, are there other things that you might, right? So do that. That's the main call to action. As far as agency owners or agency employees, head over to Sidekick Strategies and check that kind of stuff out. Or if you need agency services, check that out as well. The one thing I will, as like a secondary CTA, Mike, and then I guess we'll be out of here, is because there's one piece that we didn't talk about, and I want to make sure that I hit on this because I think it's important for the people listening, and also for them to maybe help other people that they run into. The big differentiator that I have found over the past 12 years of helping people with HubSpot and inbound marketing is this fact of being a good human shouldn't be a business differentiator, but being a good human is a business differentiator. And one of the things that I found as I help people with HubSpot and inbound is not everybody has been given the opportunity to either be born in a situation that they just fundamentally know what it means to be a happy, helpful, humble human. They don't have the education that it takes to understand that there's the old school ways and the spammy ways, and then there's also the more like human way. And so the secondary call to action is, if you're the human who there's got to be a better way, if you're the human that you realize you want to actually live the best life that you could possibly live, if you are the human that's trying to unlock yourself from this idea of limiting beliefs and having this structure in your life that we kind of talked about at the beginning, of these core values and self-belief, and actually manage fear and lessons learned versus failures and things like that, then my secondary call to action here, I've spoken like a good marketer, by the way. The other place that I would want you to go is just check out beyondyourdefault.com, because that's the human side of what we're actually doing on the HubSpot agency side. And the fact that we have those, that we can pair them together, it's amazing when your clients actually start quoting things that you said on your personal growth podcast when you're actually in business meetings.
Love it. Love it. We will have the links to that and everything else we've talked about today in the show notes, because that's all the time we've got for today, friends. But please, please, please find the podcast on Apple, Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition. Drop us a review. Let us know what you think. We'd love to have your feedback. Until next
I
time.
know I'll be listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by AgoraPulse, the #1 rated social media management solution, which you can learn more about at agorapulse.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and be sure to leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.